In the tapestry of life, where every thread holds a story, America in black and white emerges as a haven for the voices echoing through the heart of our communities. In this podcast, we wade through the rivers of our collective experiences, celebrating the vibrant hues of change brought forth by the whispers of hope and the roars of action. It's more than just a conversation. It's a journey into the heart of our society, illuminated by the light of those daring to dream and do. Join us, and let your voice be the melody that guides us toward a dawn where every color finds its place in the masterpiece of our shared destiny. Together, let's paint a future brimming with the positives that dwell in our minds and the actions that shape our world.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of America Black and White. I'm your host, Charles King, and tonight, let me start with our opening monologue. There comes a moment in every generation when we must confront the stories we've been told about service, leadership, and community and decide whether those stories still serve us. Tonight, we step into that moment with clarity and courage. For too long, the nonprofit sector has been romanticized as charity instead of recognized as an engine of strategy, sustainability, and power. But the truth is simple: communities cannot thrive on passion alone. They need structure, they need systems, they need leaders who understand that impact is not accidental, it is engineered. And so on this evening, we welcome a voice who has committed his life to reshaping how mission driven organizations operate, a strategist, a builder, a challenger of outdated norms, a man who reminds us that nonprofit is a tax status, not a business model. Tonight, we sit down with Sidney Smith, a Kansas City based nonprofit architect whose work is helping leaders across the country build organizations that don't just survive, but stand strong, scale, and serve with excellence. Let's begin. Ladies and gentlemen, let's bring Sidney Smith to the show. Hello, sir.
How's it going, Charles? Good evening.
It's going great, and it's good to have you here on the show.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad to be here. Looking forward to a great conversation.
So, is there anything you'd like to say to the audience before we get into the show?
Yeah, first and foremost, wherever you're joining us from, thank you for the time, right? I'm a Kansas City kid through and through, and so it feels good to join all of your great audience, Charles. I know you curated incredible following over the years, and so happy to be here. And hopefully, feel free toss your questions in the chat. Me and Charles, we're going to have an organic conversation, and we want to have you involved as well.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. And so, what I like to do first is I like to get the audience familiar to getting to understand who Sydney was before Sydney got to be who he is today. So, can you tell us who was Sydney Smith before the strategist, the entrepreneur, and the consultant emerged?
Yeah, Sidney Smith is a regular kid from Kansas City. Grew up throughout the 80s and the 90s, and so just your average kid. Thankfully, I came from a two-parent household, and so definitely had that structure in the household. Went to a college prep school, and so my educational background has always been one that has kind of shaped a portion of my identity. But through and through, just somebody who believes in the power of the human spirit. I guess that's the best way you can say it. I think that we hold incredible power within our hands, and I try to do my best to wield my influence where I can, and take it from there.
Mm. So, what early experiences shaped your understanding of leadership and service?
Yeah, so it was funny. I'm down here in Birmingham, Alabama, right now. My oldest niece is in college. She's playing in a softball tournament here, and so we was just talking about my time as a resident advisor. Right, in the dorms, there's typically a leader on the dorm floor, and that opportunity to have that responsibility, Charles. And then, but because I wasn't doing what I was supposed to do, I got fired. right? So I was out on the street. My free room and board was gone. I was on an air mattress for a whole semester in my friend's dining room, and but I think that earliest lesson, if it, as it were, that earliest lesson kind of taught me that leadership is more about the responsibility and the accountability that you have to do the job versus the title, right? Like I was a resident advisor, like all the other resident advisors, but because I wasn't handling my part of my responsibility, I quickly found out how quickly it could be snatched away.
Oh, wow. So, growing up, what messages did you receive about community responsibility?
Yeah, so those that likely aren't familiar with Kansas City is a kind of a hyper segregated city. We have a very strong dividing line kind of that separates east and west. And so the east side of Kansas City is overwhelmingly Black. The west side of the city is, white, non-minority. And so what I found is that all of the schools that I went to were schools that were on the east side of Kansas City. So my friends, their families, we all kind of came from the same areas. And what was instilled upon us, right, was just the importance of making sure that these teachers that are, they could be out in the suburban schools making more money, they're here for you, right? And so because somebody was here for them when it was their turn, when there's a child. So I think the major thing that we learned here in Kansas City, in the Kansas City public school system, was to give back. And so that's what I try to do, Charles, is give back in the ways that I'm uniquely qualified to give back in, and see where that takes us.
So, with that, so what is it about that experience that you use today when it comes to your communications with community to keep them stable and to keep them informed and resourced?
Yeah. I think having a yes spirit, Charles, if I can boil it down to anything, it's when there's a need and I'm capable of meeting that need. And that doesn't mean I can meet every need. And so I'm very aware of what I can and can't do. But when I have the opportunity to give in whatever capacity that is, that could be serving on a nonprofit board. It could be picking up the phone when somebody has questions or needs guidance. Just recognizing that there's individuals that was that for me, and so it's my responsibility to be that for others. It's funny how quick time passes, Charles. I'm in my mid 40s now, and that I know that's young to some, but I tell you, we have a lot of friends that didn't make it past 30, right? And so especially coming from the communities we come from. So I think that that's a big thing, is just having a yes spirit, saying yes where possible, giving back where you can, and knowing that that's kind of how this whole thing works, right? Like, you give back where you can, and hopefully others are doing their part. So when I need to call upon them, they're there for me too.
Mhm. So, when did you first realize you had a gift for strategy and system thinking?
Yeah. So I think it came about fairly recently, if I had to be honest. I've had some top leadership positions for probably the last decade or so. So CEO, executive director, those types of roles. But when I knew I had something like maybe a gift in strategy, was I took this assessment called Strengths Finders. So I don't know if you're familiar with it. There's a DISC assessment, and then there's Strength Finders. And so Strength Finders gives you kind of your top 5 strengths, as it were, so you can lean into your strengths as opposed to being kind of driven by our deficits or our weaknesses and constantly trying to improve upon them. Strength Finder says, hey, these are your strengths. Put more attention and focus on that. And my top strength is strategy. And so I think that what that did was it gave me permission to lean into strategy, because I was very self-conscious and self-aware that details aren't really my thing. That's why I married my wife, because she's super detail oriented. But for me, recognizing that, hey, as I did this assessment and this thing tells me, like, Sidney, one of your superpowers is strategy. I think that is something that I discovered maybe like 4 years ago, and it's kind of shaped my most recent part of my career journey up to this point.
So, what was the moment you knew you wanted to work in the nonprofit sector?
Mm. So interestingly, my career throughout the 20 teens. So I'll give you a quick, give the audience a quick timeline of my career. So came out of the University of Missouri in 2004, a marketing kind of emphasis in business administration. So my first roles were marketing and sales roles. And then the recession hit in 2007, 2008. Nobody was buying anything at that time. And so what I did was I went to one of my mentors who was really deep into healthcare, and I went through healthcare route. So I was a CNA. Now, mind you, this is all with a bachelor's degree already, secured. But was a CNA, kind of worked in senior care facilities. And if you know anything about healthcare, most healthcare organizations are nonprofits. And so I got my first introduction to nonprofit work just through my career, in titles within healthcare. And then recently, coming out of COVID, I left the senior care space in 2021. And that's when I transitioned into kind of like nonprofit leadership development with the role I was in at Nonprofit Connect. It's an association here in Kansas City that really focuses on nonprofit organizations.
So, with that being said, and you going through that to get to that point,
Mhm.
what was the influence that really pushed you towards nonprofit? Because I think, as you mentioned, your slogan about what nonprofits are,
Yeah,
I think a lot of people have that misconception because when they say nonprofit, they really don't think of an actual organization or a business
right.
that's an actual business. So, how did that actually really influence your decision?
Yeah, so I went through my grad program also in 2021. So my master's in business administration, and so during that time when I was in class with my classmates, you bring people from all different parts of business. We had a couple doctors in our class. We had account executives and individuals from large corporations, both locally and nationally. And so I remember the conversations we were constantly having, and it was always centered around revenue, expenses, strategy, all the things that is paramount to business success. And what I realized was that the handful of us, it was maybe 3 or 4 of us in our class that came from a nonprofit background, we weren't having these conversations, although we are businesses as well. We weren't having these conversations regularly, Charles. And I think that is something where it clicked for me that maybe one of the reasons we're not having these conversations regularly enough is maybe just the educational background or the lived experience of many people within the nonprofit sector, because they may not have come from a business education background. It's easier for them to focus on the mission, which is important, Charles. Like, I don't want to ever lose sight of the fact that the mission is paramount. The problem being is that the mission is fueled by the financial success of the business itself. And so if we don't look at ourselves like the businesses we are in the nonprofit sector, unfortunately, nonprofits will continue to dissolve and we lose that resource in the community that's so important.
So, how did your business education influence your approach to mission driven work?
Yeah. I think it helped to offer a framework for it. So there's this book that many of us in the nonprofit sector are familiar with. It's called Nonprofit Sustainability. And so it was written probably about 15, maybe going on 20 years ago at this point. But what it does is it introduces the dual bottom line that we as nonprofits we have to be mindful of. Every business has a financial bottom line. And so we're very familiar with, hey, we need to bring in more money than we spend. And if we do those things well, that's a profit margin. And then that fuels the business, future investment, all of those things. But as nonprofits, not only do we have that bottom line, but we have this other bottom line that we have to be mindful of. And that's the reason we exist, right? That charitable purpose, the reason that we say we're serving the community. And so we have to be mindful of both of those things. And so when you have two things that you got to be aware of, Charles, it's easy for us to focus on one. And I think that's what we've done as a sector. We focused a lot on the mission, the individuals and the audiences and the demographics that we serve. But if we're not doing enough talking about the other side of that coin, which is the business fundamentals, then unfortunately, what ends up happening is that those organizations that do good work, they just don't survive because the ultimate bottom line is financial, right? And so if we're not able to keep our eye on that, then unfortunately, all the good work that we do is for naught. Charles, if you don't mind, I'll tell a story quickly.
Mm-hmm.
I alluded to the fact that I was working in the senior care space during COVID. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so mind you, this is a nursing home that had been in existence for 60 plus years, and that organization doesn't exist anymore. And it is because the finances, you know, it wasn't that we weren't doing good work. We kept, you know, almost 100 individuals safe during COVID, which was a very tall task. But the reason that organization doesn't exist anymore is because of the finances. And so, you know, it's a story that I like to tell other leaders that says, hey, no matter what great work you do, we want to applaud that, but we got to make sure it's undergirded by strong business fundamentals.
Wow. So to expand on that a little bit more,
Mhm.
and when you talk about that one organization that closed down
Yeah.
compared to what you guys are doing now,
Mhm.
can you tell us in like what did that actually look like, when this particular business was going down,
Yeah.
but you still able to sustain and come back up? What does that really look like?
Yeah. So I believe strongly that absent of some very unique unicorn type circumstances, business leaders know, they see the trends, right? And so that nursing home that dissolved, that wasn't anything that was abrupt. We knew that just looking at the finances, that organization had been consistently in the red year over year over year. Okay, so we knew that if we didn't change things around, that things were going to happen. And so I came in and I brought in my team about 4 years before COVID hit. Well, 3 years before COVID hit. My CFO told myself and the board, hey, if we don't change things drastically, this organization isn't going to be around 3 years later. Funny enough, ironic, not funny, but ironic enough, COVID hit almost exactly 3 years later. And so it opened up some funding revenues and streams that we didn't have access to before. And so we was able to sustain during that time. But unfortunately, right, because business fundamentals and trends are what they are, we weren't able to turn the tide of 20 plus years of down numbers. And so we ended up, you know, that organization dissolved.
Oh wow. So, what personal values guide the way you show up as a leader?
Personal values. Um, you know, I think values are shaped by many things. You know, how you were raised, the community that you serve. You know, a lot of my values and morals are kind of rooted in biblical principles, right? So I, you know, Christian and have those things as part of my story. But I think the one of the major characteristics that resonates well with me is just authenticity, right? Authenticity, truthfulness, self awareness, and so I try to come as honest and as transparent as I possibly can. I'll tell you the things that I believe I'm pretty good at, and I'll quickly tell you the things that are probably outside of my wheelhouse. Right? It keeps both of us, both sides, on the up and up. So authenticity, transparency is important, but I think the other piece that's really big for me is servant leadership. It's been something that was instilled in me early. I kind of talk about those Bible principles. I think that you know, those that are believers, right? We know that Jesus was the ultimate servant leader, and so I think that one of the things that I try to do is do my best to serve, knowing that through service I receive, right? Like because I'm able to serve you, I receive all of the intangible and the tangible benefits that comes through service. And so those are probably the two major ones that I think define me the best.
So, what is one life lesson that continues to shape your decision today?
Mm, yeah. I probably go back to my time during COVID, Charles. I think that you know, myself ultimately, but our team, we had to make some really tough decisions during that time. I mean, decisions that, we were waiting on direction from federal agencies and state and local government, and they just didn't come quick enough. So I think that one of the major things that has shaped kind of where I am is just being mindful that if it's not life or death, Charles, right? Like we can probably work ourselves through it. And I think in the role that I have as a nonprofit consultant, and we're talking about strategy, it's easy for leaders to get in this analysis paralysis, right? Like we overthink and we end up not taking action because we're waiting to get all the information in. But the fallacy with that is all the information never comes. We never have all the information. And so I think one of the best things that I learned during that time was be very self-aware, take the information that you have, seek out other pieces of information, but make decisions quickly and make it rooted in a sense of understanding the risk on both sides. If I don't make this decision quick enough, these are the consequences that we may face. If I make the wrong decision, these are the consequences we face. And so being able to help leaders navigate that, because it really served me well during a time where I literally had lives in my hands and my decisions. And I think by going through that, it just helps to put everything else in perspective. I don't get caught up on the decision. I know it's one decision followed by many other decisions that we'll make once we get more information.
Okay. That's what I was about to ask you as a lead in and a follow up to that is
Mhm.
as you got more into leadership and from that experience that you just experienced,
Mhm.
is that where you took your mentor role as well as to mentor others as you're coming into your organization?
Yeah, I think that it's funny because I alluded to the fact that I'm in my mid 40s, and so I have mentors, right? And it's interesting because at some point in time you make this transition from being mentored to being a mentor yourself, and I think that transition probably did happen over the last 5 years or so. Going through that process was that time during COVID was so unique, right? So few people had that kind of that at their helm and in their back pocket. And I think that was something that allowed me to be more self-aware that, hey, I got some experiences that might be beneficial for somebody else as well. And then eventually, you start getting some white hairs in your beard, and next thing you know, people start looking at you like a mentor. It's just kind of how it happens. So you got a
But
lot. Yeah, there you go. All right.
so, how has Kansas City influenced your worldview and your work?
Mm. That's a really good question. Oh man, I just had this conversation earlier this week, as a matter of fact, by somebody that is kind of relocated to Kansas City recently. Um, Again, Kansas City was very and still is fairly hyper segregated. I told you about kind of east and west,
Mhm.
but during my upbringing, Kansas City Public Schools had this thing called the Desegregation Act, where they were working to bus, suburban kids into the cities. And I'm sure Kansas City probably isn't the only location that had that, but we had that. And so I think during that time, what I realized was that there's life right outside of what my worldview was, which was, my block, my neighborhood. And so because of that desegregation and bringing in all these different kids from different parts of the metro, it just opened up my eyes a little bit. And it gave me more of a sense of self as it relates to different races, right? Because, my neighborhood was overwhelmingly black, overwhelmingly kind of socioeconomically, we were about the same, which was working class. And I think that Kansas City has shaped all of us that are here in a way where we're aware of race, but the funny thing is we have this thing called Kansas City Nice. And so Kansas City Nice is just like, we constantly, or we don't say the hard truths out loud. We like to be nice about everything that we have, kind of like a Southern hospitality thing. And I think that that's also shaped me trying to speak up and speak out a little bit more as I've gotten older, because it serves none of us if we're not speaking truthfully, speaking transparently and honestly. And so I think those are some things that's pretty unique to Kansas City.
Wow. So, but tell me this, because I know that there are a lot of influential people from historical context that's come out of Kansas City.
Mhm.
And as I think about, and I think that we talked about this to some extent when we chatted,
Mhm.
but with Charlie Parker,
Yeah.
coming from Kansas City, which a lot of people, I guess, unless you're musically inclined, you probably don't know Charlie Parker, but you should.
Yeah, you should,
With
right?
Charlie had done a lot around the city and was building the city's infrastructure, and I'm sure that it was on that east side.
Mhm.
So when you have people like that that set some different standards,
Mhm.
and set high standards, how did you rank yourself, or how did you get yourself set to go into your leadership role, knowing that there were like plenty of big boots that were out there that needed to be filled?
Yeah. It's a great question, Charles. I think that we quickly, as we become adults, and I can only speak from my experience, but as we become adults, I think we all become very aware of we have a legacy as well, right? And so you have individuals like Charlie Parker and Satchel Paige and all of these great individuals that came out of Kansas City. And I think that one of the things that we're mindful of as we get older is that we have influence as well. And I think that that's something that's set with me. I've always been a humble person. I don't need the spotlight. It's not really my thing. But I also recognize that it's a responsibility, right? It's a responsibility for you to take the talents that you've been given and to do something with them. And so Charlie Parker, he took his talent when it came to music and jazz and turned that into, a testimony, a ministry, however you want to put it, right? Like he put himself out there in that way. Same way with Satchel Paige and all the accolades and the things that he was able to do. I'm not musically inclined. I'm certainly not athletically inclined. But one of the things that I think that has always served me well is that business is relatively, I understand it. It's not a big mystery to me. And I know that a lot of the nonprofits that are out there are facing challenges that may seem big and daunting. But, for me, it's just like, hey, like this stuff comes second nature. Let me see if I can help you out. Yeah.
So, what is something people often misunderstand about your personality or your leadership style?
Yeah. I think people assume that I'm an extrovert and I'm not, you know. Yeah, it's not really it's not my thing. You can ask my wife. I could be in solitude for hours and hours and hours on end and be perfectly okay. I think that what I recognize though is that the world that we live in right now,
Mhm.
it's very much a world of attention, right? How can you gather the attention of people, right? We all have these phones, right? We all have these phones that captures our attention if we want it or not. And I think one of the major things that is important to me is making sure that even it's not about me, right? It's service. And so even though I may want to not be on, social media, or, I might not naturally be inclined to do the podcast and those sorts of things. Like, this is the world we live in now. And so that's one thing. I think the other thing that people misinterpret about my leadership is that I'm very friendly. I'm very kind of like, yeah, friendly is a good word. And I think, but I'm friendly all within the confines of business. And so if there's some hard decisions that have to be made, I've had people that I work with that are really close friends that I've had to suspend, when they were working for me and kind of reporting up to me because they didn't meet the standard that we needed to have. And so I think that some people misconstrue the friendliness for me not holding them accountable until they find out that I will. And I think that's one of the things that most people may not realize. They don't necessarily think that Sidney has that hard line at times, which I do. So.
Sometimes you don't want to have to find out.
Yeah. I'm like, please don't make me make this decision, but I'm very capable and willing to make this decision. So yeah.
So let's transition over to get a little bit more in depth with your entrepreneurship and the nonprofit guild. What inspired you to create the nonprofit guild?
Yeah, wow, that's a great question. I think, I can only speak from my experience and others that I've talked to that are entrepreneurs. I think you either have that entrepreneur thing in you or you don't, and it doesn't have to always be there. There might be circumstances that happen and situations that arise that kind of maybe makes you think about entrepreneurship at one point in time or another. But I can tell you for myself, one of the things that I saw was, again, as we've alluded to multiple times in this conversation, there's a conversation that was missing, I believe, that we weren't having enough of, and that is the need for more business fundamentals and being focused on that. The conversations that I'm having now are even more timely because of the administration we have in the White House, right? And so all the federal funding that got pulled and snatched from smaller nonprofits, I think people are finally starting to see that we need to be able to have more control over our revenue streams. And, any for-profit business, right? So I'm a for-profit business. The nonprofit guild is a for-profit business. I don't have anybody else to look to except myself as it relates to, is this business doing well or not financially, right? And so, but I think that nonprofits, it's easy for us to get very comfortable, and it's because how we've been conditioned, right? We've been conditioned that we apply for the grants, we have the annual galas, we ask for the individual donations, but that puts the control in the other person's hand. It puts the control in the foundation. It puts the control into the major gift donor. But what we recognize as for-profit entities is that it's us and the strategies that we lay out and the way in which we approach the market that allows us to have more control over our revenues than not. And I think that many nonprofits, because the word nonprofit, I think that there's a misnomer that we are not allowed to make profit, and it's just not the case. And so I try to help organizational leaders kind of understand that as best as I can.
Well, so let's go to the beginning because I love the idea and I love your approach, to that. But let's just say, you got some individuals that are thinking about going down that nonprofit road.
Yeah.
And for some people, having the understanding of creating a board, having to fill out that 1023, to get the organization on the record with the IRS,
right,
to even get an EIN number and to be incorporated. What are some of the things you can tell our listeners tonight as to not just that process, but just how tedious it is, because there are some confines. When the guardrails are set like this, you have to be inside the guardrails. Can you tell our audience about that?
Yeah, it's something that I teach on monthly here in Kansas City. One of the major things I like to tell individuals that's looking to determine if they want to start a nonprofit or not, the first thing you have to ask yourself is, are you okay to not be the owner? Okay, so are you okay to not be the owner? Now, what that means is simply this: there isn't an owner for a nonprofit organization. The public owns the nonprofit. And so what that means is that, yeah, you might be the executive director, you may be the founder, but you have to have a board of directors because that's a prerequisite of having a nonprofit organization. And what you got to understand is that maybe the first few years, right, as you're growing and doing things like that, that lack of ownership doesn't really feel as heavy. But imagine you doing all the work that you put into an organization you founded, and 5, 10 years down the road, your board of directors tells you, hey, you're not doing a good enough job. You need to go, right? And they're very much within their power and within their responsibility to do such. So are you okay with not owning? Number two, just because you can receive tax deductible donations doesn't mean that you're going to receive them when you first start. So I think that many nonprofit leaders, they fall into the trap of thinking, hey, I want to serve the community in a way that makes sense, that isn't happening right now. And all I need to do is put it out there, and people will donate to us, and foundations will be willing to fund us. And that just doesn't happen for small nonprofits, new nonprofits. Why? Because those foundations, they have other entities out there that have a proof of record, a track record that they can lean on, and they're just safer bets, right? They're safer bets than you would be. And so I think the major thing that I want to help individuals understand is this. I believe that, and I know this for a fact, you can do good and be a for-profit organization, right? The things that you give up by being tax exempt are heavy things. You don't have ownership. You still aren't funded in the same way. A lot of new nonprofits have to self-fund, just like new for-profits have to self-fund. And so it's this reality, what I call the wake-up call, that says, hey, if you think that things are going to be easier as a nonprofit, I assure you they are not. People can donate to your for-profit business just like they can donate to a nonprofit business. Charles, if you wanted to, you could send me $100,000. I won't, hey, feel free. I can't send you a tax exempt letter, but I'll take it, right? And vice versa. But it's one of those things to where if we don't understand that just because you're a nonprofit, it doesn't mean that you're going to get funded immediately. Most don't. It doesn't mean that you're going to have ownership, because that doesn't exist in a nonprofit setting. And you got to be very mindful of it. Is this the path that you can and should go down, and just going into it with your eyes wide open?
So what gap did you see in the nonprofit sector that you felt compelled to fill?
Yeah, this is an easy question for me. I started the Nonprofit Guild because I think far too often we operate in theory, right? We operate in educating nonprofit leaders, but education and action are two very different things. And so what I was seeing in the sector was that we weren't doing a good enough job of walking alongside leaders, right? So if you have a nonprofit, and let's say, you've gotten to past the elementary or the basics of nonprofit leadership. Now you're facing some challenges. You're facing some things that aren't easily explained through Chat GPT or an internet search or whatever the case may be. And so why I started the Nonprofit Guild is because I saw that. I saw leaders that had grown beyond the basics of education and professional development, and they needed somebody that was able to help walk them through those decisions that we talked about earlier, help them walk through those decisions. It's not my decision to make, but let me inform you of all the things that are around, help you be able to uncover the research you need so you'll be able to make some more informed decisions. And I think that was kind of the major thing that I saw that was missing is we need more people that's willing to go and kind of put their neck out there a little bit and say, hey, it's not enough to just educate you. Let me help you understand what's at play, what risk factors are on either side of this decision, and help you make a decision. And then if we need to, we'll revise from there, because that's how business works. We don't make one decision and it operates in a vacuum and we never have to make another decision. It's decision after decision after decision. Let me help you get comfortable making those decisions, and then we'll see how that works from there.
So tell us, how do you differentiate between your work in the Nonprofit Guild and actually working with nonprofits? Because I understand that you are for profit with it being nonprofit under the 501c3 umbrella,
Right.
but and not actually, like getting confused? How do you differentiate the two when you're doing that work that you do?
Yeah, so I believe that there's a very narrow window that, and this is my personal opinion. I think it's a very narrow window why we should create a new nonprofit, right?
Oh,
There's a
okay.
lot of nonprofits out there that are doing great work, but because we have so many and there's a finite amount, right? A finite amount, small amount of actual funding that gets out. Now, what I'm not saying that there's a small amount of money, because there's a lot of money out there, right? You know, and these big foundations and all those things, donor advised funds, like there's a lot of money out there, but there's only a very small percentage that actually makes it to the nonprofits. And so I think one of the things that I try to do is just help individuals understand that, if nothing else, go into it with your eyes wide open, right? Like go into these decisions and doing these things with your eyes wide open. And remember, if your goal is to just do good, right? Like now I'm gonna show my age a little bit, right? I'm a Jay-Z fan, right? One of Jay-Z's lyrics says, how can I help the poor if I'm one of them? So I got rich and gave back. To me, that's the win-win. And so I always try to help individuals understand that you can be a for-profit organization and still do good. But it's very difficult to do good if you don't have resources. And the biggest resource that you need is money. So I try to help individuals out and hopefully help them make the decision that's best for them.
Wow. Um, how do you define business-minded nonprofit leadership?
Mm. I define it as being very clear that margins and business fuels the mission, right? And not the other way around. A
Mhm.
lot of people think that the mission fuels the business, and that's just not how it works right now. So what do I mean by that? That means that, let's say you're a youth serving organization, and so the programs that you have for your youth, maybe it's after school programs, maybe it's some type of tutoring. Many people may think, oh, if I do that well, it's going to lead to funding. But unfortunately, that isn't how it works most of the time. Most of the time, how it works is, hey, let's make sure that the business is strong financially so we can do more work when it comes to our programs. And so I think that that's one of the major things that I try to help leaders understand, is that margins fuel mission, not the other way around, right? The business funds the mission. And the stronger business that you have, the more that people are willing to donate, the more people, foundations are willing to fund you, because they know you're going to be around for the next 3, 5, 7+ years, right? So it becomes a good investment for them. So you got to have a strong, financially strong business, and that leads to more money. But you can have the strongest program on earth, but if your business isn't, if it isn't strong, then you're not going to get the funding, because people aren't going to believe that you're going to be around long enough to get the return on investment that they're giving you.
Mm. So, so when you say that, and when you think of it in those terms,
Mm-hmm.
do you, in your consulting work, do you actually tell people of the many ways of actually getting that funding, especially from a leadership perspective? Because I think sometimes when you're actually on the for-profit side,
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of hard to revert over to nonprofit, because especially if you don't have any understanding of it,
Sure.
but it also could create some confusion where there might, to some extent, you
Mm-hmm.
know, be some commingling. Have
Yeah.
you ever heard of that, or how do you do that?
Yeah. One of the things I try to help organizations understand is that I try to make it really simple, right? There's two kinds of revenue. There's contributed revenue, and then there's earned revenue, right? So it's only two kinds of revenue. Either the money you are given, right? So that can be donations, it could be grants, it could be bequests, right? Somebody passes away and you receive some type of resources from their will. So you have contributed revenue. But then there's this other thing called earned revenue, which all businesses have, right? So transactional revenue, contract revenue, memberships, sponsorships. All of these are different types of earned revenue because you, as the organization, give something and in exchange, you receive dollars, right? And so where we are is that I help organizations to understand that, hey, you got contributed revenue and you got earned revenue. But if you're only focusing on one, which you have less control of over earned revenue on this side, you're doing yourself a disservice. It's like playing a game of spades, but you only allow yourself to play with the clubs, right? Like you're doing yourself a disservice, right? Because there's these other suits out there, AKA these other revenue streams and revenue models that you could be taking advantage of, but because you're so hyper focused on, the grant application and how do we get our individual donors up and how do we get more monthly donors, because we're so hyper focused on that, we don't pay attention to the other stuff that's out there. And so I try to raise the attention of, hey, there's all these other earned revenue models out there. Let me help you understand what they are. Let me help you align what your organization does. Let me help you get aligned with the ones that might be the best fit for your organization. Let's try some little experiments. There's this book called Good to Great. It's by Jim Collins. A lot of people that have business backgrounds, we have to read that in our programs. And what Jim Collins basically has is this concept of fire bullets, then cannonballs. So the bullets are just these little small experiments, right? You try these things out, get a proof of concept, and then once you have a little bit of a proof of concept that this might work, now we put more resources behind it, and then we get these big cannonballs, these big strategic bets that we're willing to make, and then put that out there and see if we might be able to leverage it into more and more revenue. And so that's kind of how I try to help organizations understand that point is, hey, let's try these small little experiments on the earned revenue side, right? We don't have to put a ton of resources behind it. Let's just try some things out. Oh, wow, we got some good feedback from that. Okay, let's put more resources in it. And now let's take that to the foundation. Let's take that to the major donor and see if they will be willing to fund it at a level that allows us to be a little bit more sustainable.
So when we think about you and the nonprofit guild and the work that you're doing, can you tell our audience, what is the mission of the nonprofit guild? What do you guys stand for, and why is it that people that are getting into the nonprofit sector need to seek you guys?
Yeah. So I think our mission is simple, and that is to bring and raise awareness of the importance of business fundamentals within the nonprofit sector, right? So I firmly believe that we do great work. I firmly believe it. I know we do. I see it every day. You probably see it in your community, Charles. Like, we know that nonprofits are doing good work. The problem is that if we don't get more sound business fundamentals, unfortunately, what's going to happen is that those organizations that are doing good work in the community, they're going to go away. They're going to dissolve. And so we have these demographics of people that depend on those services, and they're not going to have anyone to turn to because the business fundamentals didn't allow that organization to continue on. And so here at the Nonprofit Guild, we try to make sure that not only do we work alongside you with strategy, what's coming on the horizon, right? Okay, so what does it mean that we have a federal administration right now that has pulled funding, right? What are the trickle-down effects? You might be so busy serving the communities that you serve that you haven't had a chance to really think about it. Well, that's my job. That's other individuals that do the type of work that I do. So let's create a strategy to say, okay, well, how are we going to get through the next 24, 36 months? What is that going to look like? What risk do we have to take? What things do we may want to keep the same until maybe we can get another administration in place? All of those things are the types of things that the Nonprofit Guild does. And I think realistically, others that do this type of work for strategic planning, revenue diversification, all of those sorts of things are the things that we try to do here.
So what does sustainability really mean for a nonprofit organization?
Wow. Sustainability, I believe it means the same thing for a nonprofit or for-profit. And that is your ability to be able to survive, but also to thrive, right, in the future. In my for-profit business, am I sustainable, right? Like that's a question I have to ask myself, right? Do I believe that the value that I bring to the world, to the marketplace, to nonprofit organizations, is it one where it's going to allow this business to stay sustainable, right? In other words, the ability to be able to continue on to do the things that you were set out to do, right? I think that's what sustainability means in a nutshell. So for nonprofits, it's the same thing. How is it that your bottom line is looking? Again, I have personally, I've worked with thousands of nonprofits, in part over my career. What I would tell you is that I rarely see a nonprofit dissolving because it's not doing enough good work in the community. I see nonprofits dissolve because the business fundamentals, aka they don't bring in enough revenue, right? They were dependent on one funding source far too heavily. That funding source goes away. Now that organization isn't viable anymore. So they go, it dissolves. And so I think that that's the thing that I believe sustainability is. It's the ability to be able to weather the storms, right? We know everything is up and down in business, right? There's going to be times where you're riding high off the hog, like my mom would say. You're doing great, and in an environment like that was during COVID, right? There's a lot of money coming out of the federal government during that time, right? But there's times like this where it's fairly dry. We're looking at a funding desert out there with this federal administration, and so we got to be mindful of how we can survive that too.
So when we think about nonprofits, you tell me plus or minus your opinion. Do you think those that are really thinking about doing nonprofits, do you think these are things that they should be thinking about creating these organizations, or should they be thinking elsewhere?
I hate to be the dream buster, right? I don't want to kill anybody's dreams, but what I would say is this: there's a finite amount of money out there. The individuals that hold that money are more apt to fund the organizations that are already in existence versus the new one that's going to be popping up. Likely there isn't a relationship there, right? People typically give not solely because of the programming that you do, but because of the relationship that you have, right? And so I think that if I was advising, an individual on should I start this nonprofit or not, I think you got to be really, really, really unique and special, right? In the sense that this thing isn't happening anywhere else. We're being revolutionary. We're being transformative in our community. And if you have that, great, because you've chosen the hardest path, right? Because remember, we talked about that dual bottom line. Because you're going to do work, but you still got to make the thing happen. And I think that if I had to advise people, I would say know what you're signing up for, and that don't fall into the fallacy of thinking that you can't do good and be a for-profit entity. And I think lastly, Charles, is just understanding very acutely that there's a need for us to support the organizations that's already out there. And by starting up your nonprofit, you may be taking attention away from an organization that is just more capable. They have more resources, they have more relationships. And if they had your idea, right, maybe you could partner with this organization instead of starting a new organization. So I don't want to kill anybody's dreams. I just like to be very realistic and pragmatic and help people understand that chances are you don't have something that is so unique and so novel that you need to start a new nonprofit. Maybe you can just take that idea to an existing nonprofit that's doing good work and seeing how you might be able to integrate with them, because you don't own it anyway, right? The moment you start a nonprofit, you've given up your ability to own it. And so if you don't own it anyway, why not just give that idea to an organization that might be more fitting to be able to make best use of it?
So what are the biggest myths that nonprofit leaders still believe?
I think the myth that nonprofit leaders still believe is that doing good work is enough. I think they think that if we just continue to do good, that's going to be enough. And unfortunately, I think that what I see, and I can only speak for myself, Charles, I see a world that's getting more and more, they're looking more and more within, right? Maybe we're becoming more and more selfish as a society. Maybe we're feeling less and less secure in our own personal finances, and so we're maybe less apt to give in the way that our predecessors have. I think about there's a 10-year age gap between me and my younger sister, and our lived experiences are night and day, right? Her ability to be able to get a home versus how easier it was for me when I was an adult, a young adult, to get a home, right? Like the environment has totally changed. And so I think that a lot of leaders still fall into the misbelief that doing good is enough, and it's just not anymore. You have to be very structured and adept at the business fundamentals that's going to help you maintain, right? And so what are the business fundamentals? It's revenue, it's people and culture, it's marketing, it's financial sustainability, it's strategy, right? It's all of these things that you have to be adept at, right? Now, programming is a piece of it, but it's a small piece. And I think many of us as nonprofit leaders, we get too hung up on the programming and we disregard all the other stuff. And I think that's a big misnomer in our sector.
I've and just listening to that, um, I don't think it's a dream killer, but what I do think is that as you were just discussing this, I'm listening to a lot of things that I see, like yeah, I see it in for profit as well as in some nonprofits.
Mhm.
Is that the discipline and the structure is primarily the problem because I think, and I'm not being shady, okay? I don't
Yeah.
make sure that I'm not being shady,
Mhm, mhm.
but there are a lot of organizations, that you mentioned about this money and so forth, that are getting this nonprofit money. How they're still open, I do not know
Yeah.
because there's definitely misappropriations and there are things that are happening that it's not what the intentions are. And
Sure.
so, as I think about when you say, for those that want to get into the nonprofit sector, I think that has a lot to do with that.
Mhm.
This is just my belief, and
Yeah.
you can correct me because you know all about nonprofit. But I think that it's some abuse from organizations already that's actually keeping organizations that I think are much greater that wants to come in that's keeping them out.
Yeah. So no, I don't think that's being shady at all. I think we have to put it in context though, because I think that sometimes when we have this discussion about nonprofits, it's easy for us to point to that misappropriation and that fraud. And I think it happens in all types of business, right? And so not to get political, and I'm not gonna dwell on it, but if you if you look at our federal administration right now, there's a whole lot of question marks that I can raise my eyebrow to as a taxpayer, right? With our tax dollars, there's a whole lot of questions I can ask too. And so I think that where we are right now is I think that as a society, we're in a trust deficit, right? If I can go online and it's more and more difficult for me to differentiate reality versus AI, right? It's certainly going to be. I'm going to have the side eye, right? I'm going to be raising my eyebrow to, well, where's that money going? I think it's a very, very, very small percentage of organizations that misappropriate. Why? And I'll tell you this because 70% of organizations that are nonprofits, my light went out. 70% of nonprofits are $1 million or less. They're $1 million or less, and so those organizations they're in a place to where they have to they couldn't misappropriate a lot of money if they tried to, right? But if you look at any of these recent headlines about some of the questionable spending coming out of Washington recently, right? There's a lot of ability for us to ask some questions about that too.
You're absolutely right. So, um, how do you help leaders shift from passion driven to strategy driven?
Yeah, I think you what you do is you create strategy around the passion, right? So you don't have to choose either or. I think that the best strategies out there leverages the passion that you have, but it leverages in a way that I follow kind of a modern leader of strategy called Roger Martin. Roger Martin has like a 10-minute video called "A Plan Is Not a Strategy," right? Because I do a lot of strategic planning. And so a plan is not a strategy. And so what it does is it essentially tells us that we don't know the future. We don't. And so because we don't know the future, we have to make what he calls a strategic bet, what we think is going to happen out there in the future. And then we position ourselves in a way in which we can win in that future state, right? And so I think that's one of the things that I try to do in kind of my unique way of talking about strategy and helping an organization figure out what the next step is to take that passion, okay, but now we put a strategy around it. Okay, so who else is passionate about this, right? And how can we take this passion and maybe we can take it into the foundation so we can get grant funding, but oh, are there other individuals just in the marketplace that may benefit from this as well? Well, let's see if we can put an earned revenue model behind it, right? And so I think those are kind of the ways in which I try to help strategy and passion kind of meld into one. Is how do we take your passion, because that's unique, it's probably unique to you, no other individual can have your level of passion in the way that you do it. How do we take that and we create a strategy around it to help us position ourselves in the future for a win?
So let's transition over to talk a little bit about Guild Check,
Mm-hmm.
the business audit, the nonprofit
Mm-hmm.
business audit. What inspired the creation of Guild Check?
Yeah, I think that I believe so. Guild Check is it's a self-assessment. It's free. It's something that I created a little bit less than a year ago. What it's meant to do is just give a nonprofit leader an opportunity to answer some, about 50 questions or so. But what it does is it allows you to be able to, without anybody looking over your shoulder, right? That this information doesn't go out to anybody, but what it does is it gives you the ability to be able to self-assess where you are in what I believe are 8 pillars of business success, right? Nonprofit business success. So executive leadership and board governance, brand and awareness, financial sustainability, strategy and adaptability, people and culture, right? All these different areas. You can take this test, not a test, it's an assessment, but it'll spit out a response to you to say, hey, this is how you graded in each one of those areas, right? Where did you rank high? So, hey, keep up the great work in this area, right? Just be mindful that, this is a strength for you. And maybe these are some things that may erode at it if you don't pay close attention. Did you do just okay, right? It's not a weakness, but it certainly isn't a strength either. And then the low scores are, hey, this is an area of improvement. That's why I created it, was that ability for a leader to be able to, in the comfort of their own home, in front of their own computer or their own mobile device, let's answer some questions and see where we are, so we can start to put some things in place in addressing some of those weaker areas more strategically.
So how does Guild Check help leaders see their organizations differently?
Mm. What it does is, I think if it's used correctly, if we're answering the questions honestly, what it does is it gives you the ability to be able to focus on an area or two that you could say, hey, you know what? We're not seeing the funding that we want to see, right? But if you go through that assessment and it says like, hey, brand awareness is low, right? So the people that know about you, love you, they support you, but because enough people don't know you, enough people can't support you. And so Guild Check just gives you an opportunity to be able to kind of quantify areas of improvement, and then gives you the ability, right? Because when we know better, we should do better. It gives you the ability to be able to now focus on it and say, okay, I kind of thought that brand and awareness might be an issue for us. Man, maybe I should look into bringing in a social media intern, or maybe I should look to set aside budget in future years for us to get somebody on staff that can help us, right? Those are the sorts of things that Guild Check is meant to uncover.
So what are the core components of the audit?
Yeah, the core components are just 8 business fundamentals. So off the top of my head, let me see if I can give you all 8. Brand and awareness, executive leadership and board governance. Number 3 would be revenue development and diversification, financial health and sustainability. Number 4, number 5, programmatic performance and impact. Number 6 would be people and culture. Number 7 is technology and operations. And then the 8th one is strategic clarity and adaptability. So those are your 8 business pillars. I believe that if you're able to focus on those, any part of business is encapsulated in those 8. And so when you take that assessment, you'll have maybe 6, 7 questions per category that would then correspond to the score based off of the selection that you made. And from there, you're able to determine if you're doing good, not so good, or terrible.
That I like that core, because that to me actually signifies what we think about on the profit side as business health.
Yes, exactly. That's what it's meant to do. It's called a business audit, a nonprofit business audit, but that's what it is. It's giving you a synopsis, your feeling as a leader of what is the organizational health of this nonprofit. Are you sustainable or not?
So let's move over here and talk a little bit about your community engagement and board leadership.
Yeah.
What does community engagement mean to you at its core?
Yeah, community engagement is that, like, because none of us live and operate, unless you're like some, hermit, right? Like, we all operate within community. And so community engagement is simply understanding the space that each one of us takes up in our communities, right? Good, bad, or indifferent. And engaging is being intentional. So what I believe community engagement is, when it's done correctly, is recognizing that there's things that we benefit from community, but there's things that community needs, right? And servant leadership through community engagement is understanding what unique skills you have, what you bring to the table, and how can we make our way to benefit the community that we're a part of.
How has your work as a board member shaped your understanding of governance?
Yeah, so what it does is that I believe that every board member is a fiduciary. That fiduciary simply defined as, we're going to do what's in the best interest of the organization, right? That is our responsibility as a board member. And so I think that sometimes we can get on boards, and I've been guilty of it myself. I try to do a much better job of it now that I know better. But it's easy for us to just kind of rubber stamp things like, hey, the executive leader wants it done this way, so we do it this way. But I think an effective board member understands that you have to push back a little bit. You have to offer a little bit of guidance at times, right? Because you're doing what's in the best interest of the organization. So even if that leader recruited you specifically to serve on that board, right? He or her brought you to bring yourself on that board. Your responsibility is to do what's in the best interest of the organization.
Mm-hmm. So what makes an effective board in today's nonprofit landscape?
Yeah, an effective board is diverse. And so, and we're not talking just racial diversity or gender diversity. We're talking about diverse in lived experience. We're talking about diverse in networks. A strong organization is diverse in all areas and all aspects. What it does is it brings all of those different perspectives. And so we're able to make hopefully better strategic decisions. We're able to reach pockets of individuals that we wouldn't be able to reach on our own. A good board is a diverse board.
So what is it recommended? How many members on the board is that? If I'm not mistaken, I know some people have as many as 10.
Yeah.
But is it like Is it comparable between that 5 and 10 range, or should it be more?
Yeah, so I think it depends on the size of your organization. Most new nonprofits, remember, 70% fall up under that $1 million annual revenue threshold or below. So I think those, first and foremost, we always want to have an odd number, right? Because when we have to vote on things, we want to. Uh-oh, you still there? Okay, there. All right,
Yes, I'm here.
my hold on, give me a second here, Charles. Want to make sure my stuff didn't go off. Okay, here because I think
Okay.
my computer is getting low on juice. But let me answer your question
Okay.
quickly. I think the major thing that organizational board members need to be mindful of. Okay, we're down to 11%. So what organizational leaders need to be mindful of is that number one, you have a responsibility to do what's in the best interest of the organization. But I think from there, we got to be mindful of, hey, diversity is where we need to be. And then last but not least, just being in a place where if we're able to get in front of different people, to get new perspectives, we'll be good to go. And I'm gonna change. I'm gonna plug my computer in real quick, Charles. Give me just a second. All right. Here, there. All right, Charles. There we go. Let me bring up this new camera for you. We'll be good to go.
Yes, I hear you.
All right, sorry, Charles. Let's see. Okay, perfect. I'm gonna bring this. Give me a second here. Duplicate these displays. Okay. All right. Keep these changes. Okay. All right. I'm bringing my computer. I mean, changing my camera now, and we'll be good to go. Here. Let's go to this one. All right. It should be going up. But yeah, feel free to next question, Charles, while I get this together on my end. My apologies.
Okay, I'm gonna transition over to your work in with Meals on Wheels and your service work.
Okay.
What drew you to volunteer with Meals on Wheels?
Yeah, I think that the recipient of many of those meals are seniors.
Hmm.
It looks like I might be delayed a little bit, Charles. Can you still hear me just fine?
Yes, I hear you.
Okay. Okay, perfect. So yeah, so as just understanding that Meals on Wheels typically supports seniors, and so if there's anything that I can do to support seniors, even if it isn't in my day-to-day role as a nursing home administrator or working in senior care day to day, being able to support an organization that supplies meals to those seniors that may need it the most, that's a big deal for me.
Mhm. So, what have you learned from serving seniors in your community? Can you hear me?
Charles, you still there?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Can you hear me? Yeah, I can hear you now. Okay, we're good.
Yes.
Okay. So what ask that
Okay.
question again? I didn't catch
Yes.
it.
So, what have you learned from serving seniors in your community?
Oh yeah. I think the major thing that I've learned is that if we're blessed, we all travel that path at some point, right? And so I think that one of the major things that has helped me in my service of seniors is just that perspective. They've lived longer, they've seen more, right? Their lived experiences is sometimes double our age. When I was younger working in those environments, I had individuals that was 3-4 times my age. And so I think that serving seniors has taught me that that old adage, keep living long enough and you'll encounter it. So and so that ability has been I've cherished that, and so I take it seriously, and so I love to serve the seniors because at some point in time, again, if I'm blessed enough, I'm gonna be a senior myself, and I'm hoping that there's going to be a younger Sidney, down the road that's going to be willing to help and give me a little help where I need it.
How has this work influenced your understanding of dignity and service?
Yeah. That's one of the major things that is important in senior care is that ability to be able to have dignity for those that are still able to make their decisions, right? And so I think that there's something to be said about our society, unfortunately, just isn't a society that values seniors in the same way that we value youth, right? It's not one of those things that is a part of American society. And so I think that I believe strongly in making sure that our seniors have that ability to be able to maintain their voice and their decision for as long as they can, right? And helping families to navigate that, right? Because a family member may not understand why their loved one is choosing to discontinue some level of treatment, if they're ill or something like that, knowing what the consequences of that decision may be. But if they're still with their right mind, we got to give them that dignity to be able to make that decision, because guess what? I want to be able to make those decisions when it's my time, if I'm still with my right mind. So those are some of the things that I believe that are important in maintaining dignity for our seniors.
What moments from Meals on Wheels stay with you the most?
Mm, I think the moments, they're varied, but I think that, I would say that a lot of those drivers, oftentimes, seniors are isolated many times, especially if they don't have family nearby, maybe a spouse has passed, maybe they never had kids. And so those individuals, maybe that Meals on Wheels driver is the only interaction that they really have regularly with kind of the outside world outside of their home. And so I think that that's one of the things that in hearing those stories of the individual that their Meals on Wheels driver has been their main point of contact for years. It's amazing. I've never had the privilege and the pleasure of like going on those being like an actual Meals on Wheels like delivery person of those meals, but in board meetings I will hear about those stories, and you will oftentimes hear of individuals that they don't leave the house anymore, right? They can't drive, they don't have family nearby. It becomes a hassle. So that human to human interaction is big. I'll tell you a quick story, Charles. When I was running the nursing home during COVID, I think the thing that got people that caused people to pass away even more so than COVID was a failure to thrive, right? They weren't able to see their family members anymore because we had to, keep people safe. We had to keep family members from visiting. But that failure to thrive thing is big. And so when you have somebody like a Meals on Wheels driver that's able to go to a home and offer a word and listen and be a face that they recognize and they trust, that's a big deal.
So when we had an opportunity to chat, I mentioned that we do Black History 365.
Yeah.
And I asked you, who were the most influential persons in your life and career in Black history? You told me that was Sidney Poitier and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
Yeah.
Can you tell us, why is Sidney Poitier one of the most influential figures in your life?
Well, I think first and foremost, probably because my mom named me after him, right? Like, I always joke if I was a little bit younger, right? I might have been named after Denzel because that was her favorite actor after Sidney. But I think Sidney's life story is one of just perseverance, right? Like the man came from the Bahamas and I think it's the Bahamas. It's been a while since I've read his autobiography, but came from the Bahamas, right? Like, he was a trailblazer, right? Like there weren't a lot of like top billing Black actors that was able to go toe to toe with the top white actors in Hollywood. But Sidney just commanded your attention. And so I think that's one of those reasons why, as a young kid, I hated having the name Sidney because it was, everybody said it was a girl's name. But as I got older, I really appreciated, the history behind what Sidney really meant to the entertainment industry, but specifically the Black people in the entertainment industry. So that was a big reason that I appreciated Sidney. And Martin Luther King, I mean, I think it's fairly obvious, but for me, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was an individual that I think a lot of people don't realize how young he really was, right? Like Dr. Martin Luther King wasn't some 50, 60-year-old man that had all of this insight and wisdom and perspective, right? Like he was a relatively young man, with, as we all have, he had his flaws. We all got our flaws, but one of the things that I appreciated the most was his fearlessness, right? Like he had his faith over fear was incredible. And so I think that the fearlessness of a Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the ability to be able to command a room of Sidney, I think those are two individuals that I appreciate a lot.
So, what lessons from Portier's career resonate with your own journey?
Yeah, I think that I can't necessarily say that there's any like one moment in Sidney's career. But what I will say is this. One thing I always appreciated about Sidney Portier's career was his humility, right? Like he could have easily been a lot more arrogant than he was with the accolades that he had. But I think Sidney understood his responsibility as being one of the first. And so, and I think that resonates well with me is not necessarily being a first, but just the responsibility of leadership. And so I think that that's a big thing that I love about Sidney's leadership and his career was simply, it was, hey, I'm here. So you can't look over me, right? Like I'm a man, like look at me, right? But also in the level of humility of just being able to say, hey, you know what? Like, yes, I've done great things, but I'm still a man just like you, right? And so I think that humility was a big piece that I appreciate.
So, how has Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. shaped your leadership philosophy?
Yeah, we know Dr. King from his speeches, at least my generation, right? We're a little bit younger, so we didn't necessarily see King in action per se. But what I will say is that Dr. King was he was introspective. He was a man that understood fully what his decisions meant, right? I firmly believe that Dr. King knew that by choosing a path that he chose, he was going to be putting his life in danger, his family's life in danger, and yet he still showed up, right? Despite all of those things, he still showed up. And so for my leadership, I appreciate that ability to be able to understand the importance and still step into the unknown and still show up in a way that benefits others, right? Like, Dr. King could have easily, kind of stayed under the radar, served his congregation and let that be that. But he saw that there was something bigger and he was compelled to go after it and he did it fearlessly. So yeah, that was a big one.
So, what aspects of Dr. King's legacy guide your work today?
I think the aspects are simply showing up. You got to show up. And even when, because it wasn't as if Dr. King didn't know of the assassination letters and warnings and all of those things, but he still showed up. He showed up. And so I think that if I could take anything away, it's because I would tell you is not to the level of Dr. King, but focusing on earned revenue, although it's maybe becoming a little bit more popular based off of some of the things that we're seeing at the federal funding level. But the easy route would be, let's focus on individual donors. Let's focus on storytelling, right? Like let's focus on programming, because so many people believe that nonprofits are in existence to not make a profit. So what I'm saying isn't necessarily popular, but you still got to show up because it's the reality. And so I think I try to take that from Dr. King's legacy, at least a little bit.
So, how do do these two icons influence your approach to service and excellence?
Mm, I think I think with both of them, they were okay to be the face, right? Like they both of them were okay. Sidney Poitier during his time was the face of Black America and expressed in Hollywood, expressed through film. Dr. King. There's others that were a part of that civil rights. That era. So I don't want to just say that it was just Dr. King. We know there was a lot of others, but he was one of the voices. And so I think that ability to just show up, that ability to be able to be front and center. I think about, I don't want to get too biblical, but you think about Aaron and Moses, right? And Moses being called, to do something, and he didn't feel like he was the one, right? But I think all in all, I think Dr. King and Sidney both were okay to be that face. And so, and it was bigger than them. And so I think those things resonate with me. Sometimes the message I try to carry is bigger than me. So show up and say it.
So, what responsibility do you feel as a Black leader in today's nonprofit landscape?
Ooh, what I would say is that as a Black man, we aren't represented as largely as other demographics are represented in the nonprofit sector, and I think that our voice, I try to be a voice, right? Like, but I recognize like my identity is that of a Black man, right? So I show up as a Black man, but I would say that our sector is one that is probably more skewed towards women than men, and they're certainly skewed more for white women as opposed to Black women. And so being a Black male, you're almost a double minority in that space. And so being able to, again, speak with confidence, humble as well, right? But speak with confidence and be able to have a conviction there. And I think that hopefully by doing that, it encourages other Black men to do the same thing, because I know that because there are not many of it, there's Black men that I look to and I'm like, man, like, okay, he wrote that article, or he made that social media post. Let me go ahead and let me say what I need to say too. So I try to be that for the Black men in our sector.
So, how do you incorporate Black history into your work with organizations?
Yeah, I think that one of the major things is just helping leaders understand the context of it all, right? And so oftentimes we know that the nonprofit sector is really built on serving the needs of the vulnerable, those of the disadvantaged, socioeconomically depressed, like whatever moniker or title or label you want to put on it. And I think that one of the things that I strive to help leaders better understand is the context, right? Like, if we can say that the nonprofit sector is, dominated by white women, but we also know that maybe the recipients of services might skew more minority, right? More socioeconomically, lacking than others, then it's that responsibility of me to be able to help them understand the context, right? The words that they say, the actions, the decisions, all of those things, right? So if I'm working with the client, it's helping them to understand how is this going to affect the people in the community. What I would say is this: a lot of people are very well aware of that their actions have consequences and repercussions. But I think just being able to help and offer my viewpoint and my perspective and lived experience is really, the best I can do in those situations.
So, what does Black excellence mean to you in the context of nonprofit leadership?
Man, Black excellence. When I think of Black excellence, I think of mentors that I have here in Kansas City. We have, Dr. D'Angela Burns Wallace is the president and CEO of the UN Marion Kaufman Foundation, right? A foundation that has, over $1 billion in assets, right? That is responsible for a lot of funding of organizations here in the Midwest and abroad. Black woman that, grew up in the same communities that I came out of, right? That's just doing the good work. I think of Kiana Thomason at the head of Health Forward Foundation, right? Another foundation that grants a lot of smaller organizations to do the good work for the community, to help address health equity issues and social determinants of health, right? When I think of Black excellence, I think of, individuals like that are in positions of power, authority, influence, and their willingness to be able to make sure that the Black community is not forgotten, right, in that funding. And individuals like myself and others that are around my age group that are doing the good work every day, going to work, right, serving those communities, doing the right things. I think that all of that is Black excellence, and there's levels of it, right? You got people that are at the top of their organizations that have a lot of influence and power, and there's others that just show up every day to work and just serve the community, and that's Black excellence too.
Final question.
Yeah.
What legacy do you hope to leave for the next generation of Black leaders?
Wow. I tell you, Charles, it's something I think about a lot. My wife and I, we chose not to have kids. And so I think, people's kids are typically like, maybe their most tangible legacy leaving thing. And, me and my wife, we don't have that by choice. So I think a lot about my legacy. I think if I could leave anything for the next generation is be hyper mindful of the talents you've been given and try to expound upon them and grow upon them to the biggest and best impact that you can possibly have. If I had to say anything else about legacy, it's just my hope is that the work that I do and the conversations I have and the consulting I do with nonprofit leaders allows those organizations to survive and thrive so they can serve the communities for decades to come, right? So if me helping them become a more financially stable organization, if by my work those organizations last for years or decades longer than they would have otherwise, like, I'm good with that legacy. That works for me.
So in closing, what would you like to leave as some words of wisdom and encouragement for our audience? Tell them how they can connect with you via your social media, how they connect with you via your website,
Absolutely.
all those things you like to make.
Well, thank you, Charles. I appreciate it. If I could leave anything with the audience is, don't take my focus on earned revenue as me telling you to abandon the things that you're doing on a contributed revenue side. Continue to apply for the grants that you qualify for. Continue to have a strategy and a plan in place for individual donors, major donors, all of those things. Don't leave that. But what I'm asking you to do is to start considering what earned revenue opportunities you can start to pursue. I talk a lot about that on my social media handles. So you can find me at the Nonprofit Guild. So that's all, the THE Nonprofit Guild, GUILD. So you can find me on LinkedIn as Sidney Smith. I'm in Kansas City. You can go to my website, www.thenonprofitguild.com. I focus on things like strategic planning, revenue development, and diversification. I have a YouTube page. I only have one video uploaded right now. We're looking to get that up and going. Take some pointers from Charles and get my YouTube game up a little bit. But I just love helping. And so if you're a nonprofit, no matter where you are, if anything resonated with you, reach out to me. Let's see if there's something that we can make happen.
First, real quick, if you don't mind, what is your YouTube channel? So I could go to it and I can subscribe.
Yes, at the Nonprofit Guild. So if you search the Nonprofit Guild, it'll come up. You'll see my face there. So yeah, would love to have you as a subscriber, Charles. I appreciate it for sure.
Okay. So before I close with my closing monologue,
Mhm.
I'd like to say to you that I appreciate you for taking the time to be here. I really appreciate you being here. And I have to say that as long as you continue to be the authentic person that you are, I am more than sure that you are going to be able to help and to serve an enormous amount of people that want to get into the nonprofit sector. Because, I think to actually, especially to fall into that lane,
Mhm.
and to be that person that's doing not only that consultancy work but the other work that you do, that communities have to appreciate it as well. And I want to tell you that as long as you need to, because we want to have you back,
Yeah.
but as long as you continue to do the things that you do, and if you need our help in any shape, form, or fashion, we will definitely be there to help.
Thank you, Charles.
And so with my closing monologue, tonight, we were reminded that leadership is not just about heart, it is about structure, discipline, and courage to build something that lasts. Sidney Smith stands as a testament to what happens when brilliance meets purpose, when strategy meets service, and when leaders refuses to let nonprofit sector settle for anything less than excellence. In a world where communities depend on strong institutions, Sydney challenges us to think what sustainability looks like, what accountability feels like, and what impact truly requires. His work is not just consulting, it is transformation, it is legacy building, it is a call to elevate the standards of service for the people who need it most. As we close, may we carry forward the wisdom shared tonight. May we build with intention, lead with clarity, and serve with the same dignity and excellence that Sidney Poitier embodied and Dr. King demanded. This is America in Black and White, where truth meets courage and where conversations become catalysts for change. I'm your host, Charles King. You guys have a great evening, and please come back and watch us again tomorrow night as we have another enlightening show. Thank you, Sydney, and I'll definitely be in touch with you.
Sounds good.